We will start with the Ministry of Basic and Senior Secondary Education, or MBSSE, Chief Education Officer, Dr. Yata Kanu, on readiness to learn, expanding access to quality pre-primary education. Dr. Kanu, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Our topic was readiness to learn, expanding access to quality pre-primary education. Now, Jessica is here with me on stage because Jessica was the person who facilitated the whole group activity. She was leading, she was asking intelligence questions, and I kind of jumped in from time to time, blame the teacher that is in me. I always like to give opportunities to people who do the work to do the presentations. So Jessica did the work, so she's coming to present it to us. I will stand by her, and if you miss anything, I can always jump in.
Thank you, Dr. Kanu. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica Davies. I am the Policy and Governance Coordinator at the Free Education Project. So our group was the Readiness to Learn, Expanding Pre-Primary School Education. Our group comprised of individuals from Gambia, Sierra Leone, Ethiopia, and Nigeria. So just a quick opening. The goal of expanding pre-primary education is focused on increasing access to high-quality early childhood education, which involves improving the availability and quality of pre-primary programs, services, and ensuring that all children, regardless of their background, have the opportunity to succeed in school and ultimately in life. Achieving the goal requires a multifaceted approach, and I'll just go through the 6 key approaches which were mentioned earlier: subsidized or free education, expanding pre-primary infrastructure, financial support subsidies, teacher training programs, public-private partnership, and improved learning materials and resources, as well as an increase in strong partnership between government and communities. So our group's approach to this exercise was basically just a discussion, each country providing their implementation approach to these 6 accesses. So regarding the subsidized, the free education, we found out that most countries are now providing students with pre-primary education. We would say that the earliest was in Gambia. In 2015, they launched their National Early Childhood Development Policy. And in Sierra Leone also, we're now providing students with 1 year of early childhood education, which starts at the age 5, between the ages of 5 and 6. The government of Gambia supports pre-primary education through a community-based approach. With regards to expanding pre-primary infrastructure, in Gambia, each primary school is located within 2-kilometer radius, and each primary school has an ECD center attached to it, which is amazing. The students are already comfortable with their environment as they transition from pre-primary to primary. The government of Sierra Leone has built about 100 ECD classrooms with support from World Bank, GPE, and Orange Mobile Company. Financial support and subsidies. Apart from the subsidies of tuition, fees, and teacher salaries, we found out that governments were basically just providing school feeding to the students in pre-primary education. with a majority of the school feeding program geared towards homegrown school feeding, which gives the communities a sense of ownership of the school feeding and encourage the parents to send their children to school more because they know directly who's dealing with their food and who exactly are teaching their kids. Teacher training programs. In Gambia, ECD educators in communities are known as facilitators. The government trained these facilitators, and they've learned that through this training, more facilitators are eager to transition into being trained and qualified teachers. So the more training they give, the more the ECD facilitators are willing to get their formal education and certificates, which I think is amazing. Sierra Leone has trained over 4,000 teachers on the EGMA, which assess students and learning outcomes in the early years. We've also deployed 20,000 ECD learning materials and trained teachers on the integrated early childhood education policy. Our ECD policy was passed, I believe, in 2021, which we've seen like a great improvement of increased enrollment of students in our ECD centers. Public-private partnership, this approach is the most, I would say, not disappointing, but we need to work more on it as a sub-region. We need an increased need for improved public-private partnership in the pre-primary space. This was the only approach where we didn't have much experiences and lessons to learn. So there's definitely space for all countries to improve their public-private partnership when it comes to ECD. And our last point, improve learning materials and resources. In Gambia, ECD learning materials are provided to the centers in English, but the government tries to ensure that each center has a teacher who speaks in the local language so that they're able to translate to the students in their local language and eventually fully teach in English. In conclusion, an increase, okay, sorry, I can't conclude yet.
You forgot two important areas that were mentioned as being critical to success in the implementation of foundational learning. And that was the political commitment, the commitment from the government. I think from the presentations we all had yesterday, there is no doubt at all that in this country we are very, very lucky to have a government that is totally committed to foundational learning. We have a minister, Dr. Senge, and myself, Dr. Kanu, who totally believe in foundational learning. We believe that it is really the baseline that gives the foundation on which the kids will have to stand to be able to succeed with the rest of their educational career. And the last point that was mentioned was policy. Policy was highlighted as very, very critical to the success of foundational learning. And I think we all know why, because policy is what gives teeth to the activities that we have decided to put into action. We know that policies are a government's way of promising that they will do so and so for our children. But when we have it on paper, we make sure that they are implemented. We make sure that it's not just on paper, it is a commitment on the part of the government, which spends a lot of the money that it takes to implement a policy, and we can also share those policies with our development partners who are standing by us. So now you can conclude. I think those are the two that we left.
Thank you, CEO. So in conclusion, an increase in the access to pre-primary education involves improvements in subsidized or free education, expanding pre-primary infrastructure, diversifying financial support, expanding and contextualizing teacher training programs, building public-private partnerships, and improve learning materials and improve learning and teaching materials, along with rigorous monitoring and evaluation, alongside with the policy development and continuous political commitment with Dr. Kanu just mentioned. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you very much, Jessica and Dr. Kanu, for your presentation. But please, the next groups that are coming, we would have 3 to 5 minutes, a hard 3 to 5 minutes for your presentation. Thank you very much. Up next, we have Conrad Saki, Teaching Service Commission Chair, who will talk on supporting teachers. 3 to 5 minutes, please. 3 to 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Conrad Saki, and I'm going to talk to you about the feedback we got from our discussions on structured pedagogy. But let me start off by saying that teachers are the most important resource in education systems and a catalyst for transformation. Now, it has been widely recognized at the Transforming Educational Summit and in the vision statement of the United Nations Secretary General that teachers should be valued, empowered, trained, and supported so that they can fulfill the responsibility and become the innovators and facilitators who will guide a young generation in a world of complex realities. So teachers are central to improving foundational literacy and numeracy and building the resilient skills of their pupils. Now, let me just quickly recap. I know I have only 3 minutes, but let me just recap what we had this morning about structured pedagogy. It is a coherent package of components that work together to improve classroom teaching and learning. And the components include teacher's guide and lesson plans, face-to-face practical teacher training, ongoing teacher support, student books, and linked assessment. In our group, we looked at 3 challenges and offered some solutions to those challenges. Now, the first challenge that we looked at was the language of instruction. Best practice says that you must, at the early stages, use mother tongue language. But yet still, in some of the states that were represented in this group, teacher guides are in English, and those teachers are expected to teach their pupil in mother tongue, which will require some course switching between languages, and we thought that that was a challenge. Now, most of the teachers whom are expected to teach in the mother tongue are trained in English, which also poses a challenge as to whether they're competent to teach in mother tongue. There was also some discussions around what actually do we mean by mother tongue? Is it actually the language of the pupil's parents, or is it actually the language of the immediate environment? There was also some concerns around the assessment of young people. In some countries, the instructions is done in mother tongue language and the assessment is done in English. So how do you actually assess those kids? But by way of solutions, we thought that we can empower our teachers through the initial training to choose what language they feel best capable of instructing their pupils. Some ministries have actually made a decision on which languages they can support, and in some cases they limit it to about 5 languages. And of course, in some states, they have bilingual requirements, so you can actually switch between one language or another. There was also some concern around transitions. I think in a state in Nigeria, Edo State, there was some concerns that the government has about 1 year to go, and whether that will pose a problem with transitioning, as to whether an incoming government different from the government in power might then decide that some of these structured pedagogy might be too expensive, as they require technical assistance from abroad. And so one of the things that we proffered as a solution was that whilst you're delivering the structured pedagogy, we should also think about structured capacity buildings within ministries. And lastly, we also had some huge challenge around classroom size. In some countries, you have a pupil-teacher ratio of 200, and in terms of solutions, we looked at grouping or setting shifts, having 2 shifts, as we have in Sierra Leone, and the possibility of employing volunteers to serve as teaching assistants. I know my time is up. I must go. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saki. Next is Emily Gogra, MBSSE Deputy Minister. Follows with pedagogical core, place-based approaches to FLN. A round of applause for her, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Indeed, foundational learning is related to play-based. And we have the old adage, all work and no play makes Jacks a dull boy, isn't it? But Maria Montessori, our old-time educator, believes in this, and we are grateful to BRAC, Lego Foundation, for making play identical in our classrooms today all over Africa. Coming to our question, they say, what are the opportunities and challenges, and what are the factors of success? Well, we deliberated on all these aspects, but we focus mainly on the successes. And I'm very grateful to Hyun. Can you come up? Because you were the moderator in the group, and I'm grateful to all the participants in that group, mainly from Sierra Leone and all the countries represented here, and BRAC, and also Lego Foundation. Leslie, are you there? Thank you. And we also have a friend from Ghana, where we went recently. So we said, and the group, I listened, and then I supported them in the discussions. They say the pillars of play-based learning, supporting the instructional care. It was deliberated that there are 3 core areas if we want to succeed, where we should put premium in. First, the curriculum and the teaching and learning materials combined with the policy, and I also say the assessment. We have to look at the minimum standards. Then the second group session that we said was the teacher professional development. And the last one is family and community engagement. We really need to involve the community into what we do. There is insidious and even now a relationship between the community and the school and the community. How did the discussion go with the curriculum? we have to make it integrated. We have to integrate the local games, songs, stories into the teacher's guide. And we must make the teacher's guide flexible, because teachers, they like momentum. Whenever a manual is given to them, they will just stick to it and not move out of the box. But here we say the teachers should move out of the box and look at their local environment. The next one is they should include local materials to support the delivery. Then they should build upon existing evidence. I said it last, all these things that we are doing, play-based, foundational learning, we have been doing it. It is just strengthening the systems. I move to the next point, the teacher professional development. There must be change and required change in the teaching pedagogy. A lot has happened, and we need to change from the old. Some teachers don't want to change. It is no more teacher-centered. It is child-centered. Good relationship between the teacher, the pupil, and the parents. We shouldn't leave the parents behind. Then there must be continuous coaching and mentoring, as it was highlighted this morning. It is not only to train, but to coach. If we do not coach, it will not be sustainable. We need others to follow. We need to share the information properly. And then we need to coordinate between different ministries, the line ministries, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Local Government, the Ministry of Social Welfare, because we are dealing with children. And the last bit is the family engagement and the community. It is very important. That makes it sustainable. We need our communities to join in the learning process. We need to sensitize them. We need the parents to go into the schools to make the little play materials the children use. They have to feel it. If the children see them that they are interested in their learning, the children too will be motivated, likewise the teachers. The last one, the parents, the community need to show a difference because of the cultural practices. Wherever play-based is practiced, we know that there are cultural differences, and we must pay heed to that, and the parents must be in place to help. We are calling on everyone. Play-based is important to motivate the children, to increase their confidence and their motivation, and it will also help the people in the community to get a feel of what the children are doing. But not to say like yesterday, they are just there to go and play and eat and sing. But it is meaningful play. And with meaningful play, let us all join together to say our children will learn, and will learn for the future and for the development of our countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Emily. Kahil Ali, consultant at the Directorate of Science, Technology and Innovation, comes next with using technology to support foundational learning and education service delivery. 3 to 5 minutes, sir. A round of applause for him, please.
Thank you. You'll have to forgive me. I'm going to use my phone, as is customary at DSTI. And it's probably appropriate that I'm going to speak on using technology to support foundational learning and educational service delivery. At DSTI, just like our Minister Senge, we're obsessed with using technology to try and improve the lives of our citizens. I'll start with a brief summary of some of the projects we spoke about. One of the projects we discussed was on learning passports. Another one was on a project called GIGA, From our Liberian partners as well, they also talked about the e-library. There were also programs like the BFIT program, which is from Malawi and is used to help improve foundational numeracy and literacy skills. We also discussed the results checker, which many people in this room has used as well. In addition, we discussed the VSO School app, a learning management system. Once we discussed existing types of tech that could be used for education, we then thought about how can this be contextualized? Could we use it to improve the access for teachers to high-quality tools and learning resources for free? Could we then use these things to introduce young people to the skills they need for the future? Could we also use some of these tools to help citizens save money? Could we also use these tools to strengthen the use of data for decision-making, and not only at a classroom level, but right the way up to a district and national level? We also discussed the potential of using tech to increase human capital development for teachers and parents themselves. Thinking about this, we also began to identify some of the challenges associated with embedding educational technology solutions. Some of the challenges focused around infrastructure, things I'm sure we're all well aware of: power, connectivity, secure storage of valuable hardware and resources. There are also considerations around getting access to hardware and the large capex needed to launch a lot of these programs. Another point raised was around the language barrier, and more importantly, literacy levels. As we're well aware, in some rural areas, people may not be literate. How do we use tech solutions which overcome some of these barriers? Linked to this, we also thought about access and inclusivity. For people who have special needs, how do we use tech to help overcome these barriers and accelerate their learning? In addition to this, we started to think about how do you improve or maintain the quality as we scale solutions. Linked to this, questions around capacity building and sustainability after a project ends were also discussed. In light of these challenges, we also decided to think about some of the potential solutions. First of all, due to the context, is it possible for us to build online and offline solutions? Solutions which aren't dependent on a network, but can potentially piggyback on services around USSD and SMS, services used for the results checker. Also, is it possible for implementers to use existing networks? In Sierra Leone, we have district directors, and is it possible for somebody coming in to use that existing network to share information and build a capacity within the system? We also talked about using peer-to-peer sharing, an idea that has been experimented on by some of our partners in the group today. In addition to that, we spent time thinking about stakeholder management and making sure that people were included from the start. When shaping a tech solution, one of the solutions we stumbled upon today was that it is important to get somebody who is an end user, but also a government partner who's responsible for developing the policy. Finally, one of the solutions we identified was building systems which integrate with existing architecture of institutions. We don't really have a conclusion, but one thing we were clear about was a huge potential offered by these solutions. We'd like to finish with 2 questions from our group. Number 1, how can we use larger development projects to maximize impact? And as an example, if there's an energy project or a project focused on improving the backbone for broadband, how can we utilize this to get our maximum value for money? And secondly, how can we include more around behavioral sciences to accelerate tech adoption and acceptance among our end users? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Cahill. All right. Now, Jemba Aziz Kamara, MBSSE Delivery Team Program Coordinator, will discuss ministerial delivery approaches to foundational learning. Jemba Aziz Kamara. A round of applause.
Thank you, sir. A very good afternoon to all of you. Can we have my board here, please? Hello? Can we have the board here, please? Thank you. This one, the challenges. So we were tasked with talking about challenges, opportunities, and considerations for delivering foundational learning in ministries of education. And we had a wonderful lead, Umar, who facilitated the session. We had quite a few opportunities because we were very constrained with time. We would have gone on and on and on. But the few that we put on here were political commitment that trickles down from the ministry level to the very local level. And we thought that institutional commitment as well as donor commitment was very important, and those were the key opportunities. We also thought that evidence on what works and the pilots that we've done in schools was a huge opportunity. Resources that we had, the strengthening and broadening of partnerships and non-governmental organizations. And we had in our midst Ivorians, people from Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Malawi, and we all thought that this was a common theme. Partners have the intent to work together. And in Sierra Leone, we thought that the Minister of Basic and Senior Secondary Education is very interested in education, and his commitment to that was a plus for us, and that was a huge opportunity for us. And it was the same for other countries. But we deviated a little bit from opportunities and challenges to what we think might work well or what we think will be done better, or what the additional focus on FLN would be. And then we thought that to convene and avoid working in silos. So we have so many other NGOs, so many other institutions that are all doing the same thing, but we are all very disjointed, not all connected. So we don't want to be working in silos, we want to be working together as a group so that the recipients would benefit from one structure, one solid structure. And we thought that daily assessment and formative assessment could be really important in mapping out district schools and mapping out how we can involve the learners, how we can involve their parents into that, and really get great things out of these learning that we're providing for the children. Quality assurance and implementation was one of the ways that we think we could do things slightly better. And get more data and data and data, because that's really important if we have more data. We do have data, but we need to do more in getting this data together so that from these data we are able to interpret the result for the betterment of our learners. Inclusion. And we said we increase overall government capacity as not to rely on any specific leadership. So everybody should be included. And parental involvement we thought was very, very key. So involving the parents, whichever level that was, or that has to be, to involve them, to make sure that we teach them how to get involved or take care of their children's activities. I gave an example. Both my parents were teachers, and I benefited a lot from them because they were very much involved in my school education as compared to my peers, whose parents did not know what and when. For example, even school evening, parents' evening was. But because my parents knew, they were there and they were very much involved in that. So we said we can increase that as well. More concrete numeracy lessons rather than abstract goals. And I think if we focus on the numeracy and actually teach them how it's done, not just wishy-washy. I think that would be really important. And the challenges, we had huge challenges across countries. Undereducated parents who don't see education as a necessity or they don't think it's a desirable thing. Learning from the existing and the past before going to the future. So what that means was if you wanted to change any policy, you have to reflect on what was there before and what you're looking at in the future, not just change it without reflecting or not just changing it without having a consortium. And resistant to change. We know that that's the nature of a human being. We are sometimes resistant to change. So if we change the attitude, then we can do better in encouraging and embracing any change. And sometimes, as humans, we are unwilling to learn. So that was something that we need to change as well. But the three key factors that must be considered or achieved for ministers of education to positively impact learning outcomes and transform education are political commitment that trickles down, national level content, so folk tales, storytelling, and teachers. We know that there was another group that talked about teachers, but we just thought that teachers needed not only conducive environment, not only to provide incentives for them, not only to be more adaptable and improve willingness to learn, but also to look at teachers' well-being. Because the quality of teachers will impact on the quality of what is given to the student. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jemba. Up next, Adama Momo, MBSSE, Director of Policy and Planning, finishes with using data to support foundational learning. Adama Momo, please.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Honorable ministers, distinguished honorable ministers, guests, partners, children, colleagues, good afternoon all. I would really like to dedicate this presentation to a younger fellow of mine, Abdullahi, to take us through the presentation on data. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Momo. So our topic is using data to support foundational learning. And since yesterday, we've been talking about the need for data for evidence-informed decision-making. So it cannot be emphasized. But to have a well-rounded conversation, we had guided questions, which are firstly, what are the challenges in using data to enhance foundational learning? Then we later preferred solution. We had anecdotal experiences of sharing between the different countries, but there are commonalities among the different countries. So we are not quite specific because all of the participants are within the same threshold. So we dig deeper, and one of the major challenges we look at the disconnection between tools, different methodology, and unclear processes. Sometimes the approach might be proliferated, so it's very difficult to have a one that fits all, and there is also lack of harmonization. Another challenge that we discuss in the group is, firstly, we look at other countries, especially Sierra Leone, the need for no entity to conduct assessment at national scale, leveraging on partner supports. We made example of the EGRA-EGMA, which is limited sample size, but used for generalization. So we go a little bit in the context of things around capacity and resource constraints, which resonates with most of the country in data, because the whole thing around data generation, utilization is a cost-intensive adventure. Is not an event that you do one-off, but it's a process. We also look at issues around affordability, which we just talked about, the limited capacity of government to run this assessment due to funding issues. Point 2 also linked to point 1, which is the disconnection between tools, having different tools that doesn't speak the same language. Then we made an anecdotal reference to Sierra Leone, whereas we have a lot of data in SL. There's availability of tablets across school to gather data. Different programs have tools, but how the different data collected are synthesized and used is a major concern that we really need to look at. Which also go to the next point around so much data available, but determining what is relevant is a challenge. We talk about measurement issues, lack of alignment on what is being measured. Sometimes data generated is not mostly used. And lastly, on this point, we talked about the need of sometimes funding partners dictate methodology, which might be based on their interests and priorities, which is a key challenge. Another challenge is limited interest from government to delegate data ownership at sector level. We use the SL context, whereas there is like the statistics Sierra, which is the major body. They collect different type of data, but the data collection in itself is not sector specific. For instance, education having its own data and ownership. Most of the time, there is a general data collection body, which doesn't meet the needs of education. Lastly, on the challenges, we talk about the timeline for data collection, which sometimes does not align with funding availability. This comes as a result of an experience, for instance, in SL, whereas the annual school census doesn't rhyme with the time the funding is being disbursed. So, for instance, you really need to look at when is the peak time to collect data, and that's when the funding should be available. Let's say deep into the rainy season, that's when you'll expect that in flooding areas or riverine, children might not be coming to school. So there needs to be an alignment between when the funding is being disbursed for data collection and management and when there is peak time in data collection. Now we've talked about the challenges. We try to profile some solutions, which we believe are not new, but we also provide an avenue to talk about the enabling atmosphere for these. One is build in-country capacity to lead and integrated data systems, which we believe will limit cost on outsourcing technical expertise and ensuring sustainability at the national level. Secondly, when we talk just now around the way tools are proliferated, we talk about need for a robust policy and framework to ensure harmonized approach and effective collaboration. This will definitely limit the need for different approaches and methodologies because there is a general framework that coordinates everything. Thirdly, data collection should not be considered as an afterthought, but as a part of teaching and learning. Most times, data collection is just being used as an event, not as a process, being part of the teaching and learning. Just like one-off, we do it, then after a very long time, we come back and collect data. But it should be integrated within the learning. This also need for real-time data for effective decision-making. Lastly, we talk about develop a data ecosystem to enhance effective coordination and utilization. Finally, we try to cascade all of these into 4 major points when we ask the question around what are the factors that must be considered for the effective use of data to support foundational learning. At this point, we utilize a funnel approach of cascading it directly to foundational learning and not quite being generic. Firstly, we talked about data collection should be learner-centered, taking into consideration the teachers also. It's more like a holistic classroom approach, while community engagement and awareness. So it's a wholesome approach. Data harmonization of tool, clear purposes, usage, emphasis on usage because users of data should be available to understand, should be able to understand the data. It's not just pouring over large spreadsheets, the users themselves not understanding. Thirdly, ensure funding for financial sustainability for data system strengthening. Goes back to the thing around data management quite being expensive. Lastly, this was a recommendation that we borrowed from other West African Francophone countries that we think it exists, which is establish a regional conversation for the development of harmonized tools for foundational learning. It's not just about SL, but let's look at the region so we'll have a concerted approach of how we do it. Thank you very much. Over to Mrs. Momo to round it up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Conte. Just to crown it all, foundational learning, yes, we are all craving for foundational learning, but we know that we need to build the institutions for us to effectively see the impact of foundational learning. And such institutions has to be the learning assessment itself. As we all know, West African countries, ECOWAS country, for instance, I can say, the PASEC, that's the French-speaking African countries, they have their own assessment tools. But unfortunately for Anglophone ECOWAS country, we don't have that harmonized assessment tool with the exception of the WAEC. And WAEC is not going down to foundational learning. So one takeaway from our group discussion was to see how partners can support government to actually institute learning assessment that goes across this region so that we can actually scale our assessment to that level. So that is one key takeaway, and I hope our partners are here and they are supporting us, and of course with the support of ECOWAS and the government of Sierra Leone, you can support us, especially the Anglophone African countries, for us to do an assessment. Because there is no way you dress, like a lady, you dress and you go and there is no man to say hi, you know. So we need the foundational learning, we need the assessment, we need the institution to be built, we need the capacity to be built. In-house capacity, if we are looking for external partners, we need to build the in-house capacity, as has been reiterated by all the presenters throughout this 2 days. So I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We are just joined by the Vice President of the Republic of Sierra Leone. A round of applause for him. He just sat down. All right. I would like to invite Minister Senge to say a few words here before we continue. Minister Senge, a round of applause for him, please.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Honorable Vice President. I think this is a learning exchange, and we've been lucky to have hundreds of students with us. And in addition to us hearing from partners, we thought that the students can share their perspectives on this as well, because they've been here and participating. And so the students were engaging in their own sessions, and 5 of them volunteered to come and share their perspectives. So please come up. Where's the 5th guy? Lady, come. They went outside. She'll join us when she comes. Come in the middle. Come. And the question was simple. The question was, is that one of them? You can come. No stress. The question to them was, what is the one thing that you have learned over the last couple of days that you will take away back to your schools and to your communities? And they each volunteered an answer after some discussion. So say your name, what school you're going to, and then the answer to that question.
Good afternoon to you all. My name is Esther Kone, a student from the Services Secondary School, Juba Barracks. Well, as one of the ministers was saying, she said that education is not a barrier. Education should not be taking place only at schools. Education should be taking place even at home. If you know that you want to be educated, you want to learn something, you should go for it, because all of what we are saying yesterday was just to motivate with the students and help us to know how we should be motivated. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Fatmata M. Koma. I am attending the Moritown Army Secondary School. What I learned from yesterday and today is play. What is play? Play is a fun and enjoyable, active investigate. And what is play again? Play is the integrate of all schools across the system. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Fatmata Binta Jallo. I'm attending the Abani Municipal Junior Secondary School. The main thing I want to take home is the four skill elements structure. 1, teacher guides. 2, student textbook. 3, coach. 4, skill-based training. Thank you.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Favor Ike Kamara. I'm attending the St. Joseph Secondary School. Well, I've learned that they are trying to take foundational learning to another level, even to kids in districts that are not mostly exposed to technology. Thank you.
First of all, I want to acknowledge the presence of our noble Vice President and our noble Minister of Education. Ladies and gentlemen, I greet you all in the name of God. The man standing here today with the white skirt and gray is not less the person but Abdurrahman Bangua from the Albert Academy. Actually, I learned a lot from yesterday to today. I learned a lot, but because of time, I'm only going to talk only on one. I learned about the 4 pillars of learning, which are learn to do, learn to be, learn to know, and learn to live. Thank you.
I went to visit the students when they were sitting up there, and in conversation, each one of them put their hands up to come and speak. And these guys volunteered to come and share with all of you what you've learned. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
A round of applause for them. Are they just not brilliant? Come on, we can do better than that. We have 2 more students, and I will call upon Mr. Emmanuel Ali to introduce them. It's Students' Day. A round of applause for them.
Good afternoon, everyone. Honorable Vice President and ministers and dignitaries, thank you again for being here and gracing a wonderful occasion. We have heard from 5 of the students that we met with, and they had extensive and unbelievable conversations about what they took out of this conference and what they believe government can do to improve foundational learning. So the additional 2 students we have here, one from Convent and the other one from St. Edward's, will talk to us from that conference that we had on those 2 questions. The first one was, what is the takeaway from this conference for them? And second, what more can the government do to improve foundational learning? Over to you, ladies.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice President, ministers, and students, ladies and gentlemen, and all protocols observed. I am Deborah B.S. Geba from the St. Joseph Secondary School. And when we were having our own session as students, we were asked 2 questions by the Deputy Minister of Education too. And the first question was what we've learned during this period of foundational learning exchange. So the first thing is that education is a right, and as pupils, we have a right to education. That is the first thing that we learned. And also, the young man from Albert Academy was saying the 4 pillars of learning, which is to learn how to live, to learn how to, understand and everything like that. So when we, attending this wonderful occasion for this past few days, we've learned that being part of this wonderful learning experience is that learning should be part of us. And one of the critical things that I learned so far was the collaboration that BRAC has with the right to play. So now they're talking about play-based learning. So first of all, playing is an activity that all kids love to do. We like to run around and laugh with each other. I believe we enjoy that, don't we? So play-based learning is something that, you enjoy learning by playing. Normally teachers would prefer to teach kids the traditional way. You come to the classroom and you write English language on the blackboard and you expect them to take notes, and when they go home, you expect them to study. But play-based learning is for you to take the kids out, take them out of the classroom, maybe to the garden, and then they play around, but they'll be learning the parts of a flower. So you're playing at the same time you're learning. So that is impact in our educational sector. And that is a very, very, very wonderful point that I learned due to the presentations that we're giving today. And also, one of the things we also learned as pupils, that learning helps us improve our confidence. Without me knowing how to read, write, understand, comprehend, and explain, I won't be standing in front of you right now. Yes, and that is due to learning. Now, moving to the next one, which has to do with what more can the government do in relation to learning. Now, one thing I believe the government must do is to ensure that they train teachers well. Minister Senga was saying that he was talking about integrity, because people asked the question and said, what about teachers who, ask for money? What about teachers who, instead of encouraging me, they end up discouraging me because I'm not able to promote to the next level? He was talking about integrity. And so one thing is integrity, and the second thing is training them. Training teachers the modern way of teaching. It's connected with, allowing the kids to play at the same time learning. But if you teach the, teachers how to ensure that the kids learn, they'll be able to ensure that the kids are learning due to the modern process. So we should, our traditional way of learning is good. But, the world is changing and kids end up seeing school as a boring environment. So changing that way is going to help the kids to also want to learn more. And at the end of the day, our educational system is going to improve. And there are so many things that we learned and we understood due to this. And I would like to make one more point with regards to what the government must do, is to create an attraction. Actually, we all want something. When we are attracted to something, we want it. So I believe the government must create that platform that we draw in kids. The minister was also saying that, some kids don't end up going to school because there is no transportation, no food, and he was saying he was driving through a village or so. Imagine if you provide a system wherein, as a pupil, I know when I go to school, I'll have lunch and transportation to come home. I will want to go to school. So when I go to school, I will learn, and I come back home, and at the end of the day, I become successful. So I would like to leave the stage by is a wonderful experience. I totally support the flex system. So as pupils, we should want to learn. And as government, I believe we should also encourage both the pupils and teachers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and all protocols present. I'm Isaiah Dumbia from St. Theodore Senior Secondary School, and I'm tasked with the responsibility to answer two questions here today. The very first one is what I've learned so far, and what more must the government of Sierra Leone do in order to boosting up our educational system. Now, first up, I would like to start with a scenario. My teacher once told me that, Isaiah, this school has done a lot for me. I don't know what I'll do without this school. And I'm like, you know what, Mr. Tennessee, what have you done to actually benefit, or what have you done to boosting our educational system, or Africa's educational system? Then he said, well, I'm teaching. And I said, is teaching enough? Then he said, I'm helping in my own little way. But he gave me something that I will never forget. He said, Isaiah, if you can't do big things to big ideas, let's see little things you do actually make a difference. To start with, the very first question, let's understand what foundational learning exchange actually means. It's the exchanging of ideas in order to see how best we boost Africa's educational system. In Africa, more especially for pre-primary schools. Nonetheless, yesterday we had very good speakers here, and One that I really enjoyed was the speaker from Rwanda who talked about the Elimusoko, yes, if I'm not wrong. It's an initiative to serve as a stimuli and a learning house for innovative solutions in the public educational system. Now, I've talked a lot about Rwanda. Let's see what our minister here is doing. Now, back then in 2018, when I was told that I could actually get my NPSC Beko WASC result automatically free, I thought it was not legit until I actually did it. You know, back then we used to pay, let's say, used to pay 50,000 loans for NPSC Beko and WASC result. For those of you who don't know our currency, it's a lot. You used to pay 50,000 loans for NPSC Beko and WASC result, and now you're getting it automatically free. Isn't that a major progress we're having? Put your hands together for the minister. Nonetheless, we used to pay, back then, we used to pay 3 loans for our MPSC, BK, and WAS past questions. Now, you need to buy your objective, your essay, your practical. 3 times 3 is 9 times whatever subjects you're doing. I'll leave you with the maths. But with the help of e-learning, we're now getting these past questions automatically free. Let's say if I'm doing 9 times 9 is 81. 81,000 units being resolved, man, that's a lot. Yeah. Back then in 2019, when we had the corona outbreak, it was a very tough year for Sierra Leoneans because it was a time of deep uncertainty. The Minister of Basic and Senior Secondary Education, through the help of the government of Sierra Leone, came up with the initiative of the Edu Teaching Program, which we benefited a lot from. Put your hands together, people, if you've benefited from the Edu Teaching Program. And for those of you who don't know, it's channel 94.1, FM 94.1 rather. And to the second question, which is, what more should the government do? Now, this is a time of deep uncertainty. Now, back then in 2018, when the president of Sierra Leone, His Excellency Gitzad Brigadier Julius Madabi, was elected president, his idea was to transform our educational system. Now, transforming our educational system takes a whole lot, much more than the formal education. One thing I noticed was when President Bio was addressing our educational system, he was focusing on the formal education. Now, mind you, there are also informal education out there. Now, I'm benefiting from formal education. We're having 80%. What about those in the vocational institute? Are they benefiting from what we are benefiting? Now, just take a glance of what we've benefited just from this free quality education. We've benefited from this e-learning. We've benefited from the result checker. What if guys actually in the vocational institutes are also benefiting from what we are also benefiting? So what we are asking, or what I want the government to do more is to have a 50-50 program. Now, for having 50% for formal education, let there be 50% also for informal education. And what I noticed, and what the government should do is the rebanding of our educational sector. Each and every speaker here today, or yesterday and today, had the vision, which I really liked, the vision of transforming Africa's educational system. Now, that vision alone is a lot. But what approach should we use to change this educational system? And I came up with a solution. STEAM educational learning. You believe that leading African countries in education today are excelling countries like Ghana because they're actually using STEAM education. And for those of you who don't know, STEAM is science, technology, innovation, arts, and mathematics. So STEAM education is a system that is built for individuals or pupils in school not to waste time. I'm a science pupil. Why should I bother with economics? Why should I bother with literature? It does not make sense. But you using STEAM education, if I'm an innovative type, I might go to technology. If I'm a mathematician, I might do mathematics. If I want to be a lawyer, then why waste time in the sciences? Let me go to the arts. And I would like to leave you with these words. I guess Barack Obama said this. Don't ask yourself. Now, ask yourself, what has Africa's educational sector done for me? And reflect that again. What have I contributed to make Africa's educational sector boost? Thank you very much.
Brilliant stuff, brilliant stuff. Come on, give it up to him. Brilliant stuff. Up next is the ministerial panel. I now want to hear from the ministers, reflections from the presentations and discussions. I invite Mr. Mamadou Lamin Sow, a UNESCO senior education advisor with over 20 years of experience in international educational development leadership, to moderate the session. Mr. So, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The Vice President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, honorable ministers, my name is Mamadou Lamine Sow. I will be moderating this very important session about what we have learned over the 2 days that we have been together on these very important topics. But also, most importantly, what are we going to do? It's important for us to be together to discuss, but it is more important for us to have our takeaways, something very concrete, actionable actions that we will be doing when we go back. So I would like to invite the honorable ministers here present, Mr. Ansu Soni from Liberia, my brother, Mr. Goodluck, the Minister of Education of Nigeria, but also our sister, Madam Claudia Ayokol, and Minister David Moenina Senge, our host. So you are very welcome to the high table. So I would like to welcome the four of you again. We will have 2 questions. And the first round of questions will be, what have we learned from this meeting? Reflecting on the TESS, Transformational Education Summit, the work that we did in Paris, preparation of the pre-summit, what was done during the summit, your commitments, the commitment from each country regarding foundational learning and quality education, access, equity, everything, all the challenges that we know. And you will have approximately 5 to 7 minutes, each of you, to respond to that question. Let me start by giving the floor to Madam Claudia Ayokol, the Minister of Education of the Gambia.
Good afternoon, everyone. The Vice President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, my colleague ministers and the moderator, ladies and gentlemen, and our dear students. I must say I'm very impressed by the performance of the students we listened to this afternoon. I believe they were all very good, and a few of them were quite eloquent, and I wish them well. Honestly, I do wish them well. I could see leaders coming up from them. So this shows that teachers are doing very well, and it's left to the rest of the students to work hard and be able to perform and express themselves like the students we listen to here today. If anybody thinks that the schools are not doing much, I think you ought to have been here this afternoon. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I am one person who is very pragmatic. We've talked a lot. We have been talking a lot. And we don't want to continue talking. It's time for action. We have to get down to business and start to work. We need to start to work. Time is against us, and we cannot continue talking. I'm convinced. I wouldn't say I didn't learn much or I didn't learn anything. One thing I learned is that there are people who share my conviction. There are people who share my vision. I have always believed that foundational learning is important. And it's something that I have already lived with. I've been a teacher all my life. I've been in the classroom. I've been at the position of school leadership, head teacher, a school head. I have been in charge of an entire educational region, managing teachers and monitoring teachers to see that they're doing what they're supposed to do so that the children would learn. I'm one person who believes in success, and I celebrate achievements. So, foundational learning is important. I taught in a school where my headmistress then would not admit any child into grade 1 who has not been to a nursery school, as we used to call it in those days. She wouldn't. She would only take children, enroll them into the first grade, primary 1, then, if they have been to a nursery school. Because they would have heard, she believed they would have heard the foundation. And then they would be able to cope with learning. And for that reason, that school that I was teaching used to be among the best performing schools. It was a public school, a mission school, but it used to be among the best performing schools in the country. And parents wanted their children in that school. Enrollment, she would announce enrollment, and school started at 8 o'clock. But then as early as 6 a.m., the parents would have been queuing to get their children into the school because it was a small school. And she was able to admit only about 100 for grade 1. It was a 2-stream school. So, the parents would start queuing as early as 6 a.m. to get their children into that school. And if they were not successful, you want to see adults shedding tears, parents shedding tears, because perhaps within 2 hours they would have been told that we've reached our capacity, we cannot take more. And they would not want to hear that, and they would cry to say they cannot get their children into that school. And this was Wesley Primary School in Banjul. Yeah, so I have always believed that foundational learning was very important. It was the key to a successful education. What do we need to do now then, now that we believe? For the past 2 days, we've been talking about the importance of foundational learning. We need to pay more attention to it. It shouldn't be a rhetoric. It shouldn't be something we just talk about. It should be something that we believe in, and we want to see it happen. We want to implement the idea. Pay more attention to foundational learning. Strengthen early childhood education. Catch them young, as we would say. Catch them early. In fact, we have been told that the First from the age of 3 to 6, those are the formative years for children to learn. If they start learning at that age, they do very well. If they don't start learning early, then it becomes very difficult for them to learn. We must catch them young. We must make foundational learning, or ECD, accessible. We must train teachers, give them special training to handle that level. We must, again, use the right methodology. It's different from what you would do with the children that come into grade 1. These are early childhood development children. They at that stage. You want to develop them early. So you don't use the same methodology as you would use for those teachers who are already at the primary level. And that's why it's been said here, play to learn. Play and learn.
Thank you very much.
I said it yesterday that children learn through play. And if I may give a last one, yes, ECD, early childhood development. But what about those ones who've gone through early childhood development, they passed that stage, they're in early primary, and they are weak. They are poor in learning. I think we must design a remedial program for those ones, the early primary level, grades 1, 2, and 3. Develop or design a remedial program for them to be able to catch up and then continue.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Claudia Cole. Let me give the floor to Professor Sonny, Minister of Education of Liberia, on the same question. So, Minister, you have the floor. What have you learned so far?
Your Excellency, Mr. Vice President, our host, Dr. Senge, and all of the educators here. I need not be redundant, because what the minister has said covers our ground. But let's turn to these students. If I were to ask, how many of you here now would like to stand up and say, I want to be a teacher? You don't want to go to bank. You don't want to be a doctor. You just want to be a teacher. Let me see you stand up. Now, this is what the problem that is creeping. Many of the younger generations, especially young ones, for some reason they don't see teaching as passionate for them. And many of us who, my parents were not teachers, but many of us now who parents were teachers or are teachers are not necessarily encouraging their children to be teachers. Most of the time they tell the kids, just look at me. If you want to be like me, be a teacher. Now that is not a motivational statement. So when I ask the question, these very nice young people sitting out here, who wants to be a teacher? Not even one of them stood up. So our concern now is, David, is not these ones, are the children of these ones who will need what is happening today plus more. So folks, I want to say thank you for even joining us at this session. We are going back with a commitment. We've met as ministers. We in this region, we met and we have committed ourselves to foundational learning. We intend to synchronize our various strategies and some of the steps we need to ensure that evaluation of our students are almost uniform. that we can compare kids from one of these levels to the next. And I'm pleased to go back and say, and my president, whose vision we are undertaking and carrying out, you know, the tallest voice in the house is that of the president. And when that voice is heard, the rest of us are lieutenants. We follow the course of the president. Now, this afternoon, we want to just once again repeat: foundational learning is it. We did not see it before. We're seeing it now. When we were coming up here, David told me that the two last young people who spoke, they're from public school. That's strange, because we would expect the two kids that just spoke and the rest of them to be from the Catholic school system, to be from the Methodist school system, to be from these affluent, tuition-driven school systems. But I'm surprised that these two folks, except that they don't seem to want to be teachers, David. Yeah. So, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, we representing President George, we are in this place. I'm very happy that we have listened to each other with the ministers. We have shared some of our challenges. Now we know that we don't put half-inch steel raw in the foundation for a 10-story building. Either 1 inch or 5'8". In that case, when that building is finally put up, we are sure. This country and this continent, the decision of 2063, of course, I wouldn't be here when 2063 finally comes. But many of these will be here. They will be 50s and 60s themselves. They will be here by then. You have the responsibility to convey to the people behind you so that your generation can be of help as a generation now are being of help to you. Thank you very much, parents, and God bless us all.
Your Excellency, the Vice President of Republic of Sierra Leone, my colleague ministers, our development partners, let me also recognize my dear sister and our moderator at yesterday's panel, Dr. Obi Ezekwesili, educationist, social crusader, an active politician and activist. Our children, the students, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by appreciating our students, our children, all over Africa, represented today by the children of Sierra Leone. They have shown so much competence. They have given us hope. They have demonstrated that our stay here these few days is not for nothing. So I commend them. I also commend the government and people of Sierra Leone who brought them up the way they are and met the commitment in the foundational learning for which the children benefited and they are demonstrating. Generally, I want to commend our member countries in West African sub-region, especially because at the ministerial level we interacted and came to the conclusion that so much need to be done in times of teamwork, in times of synergy, to improve and sustain high quality education in our sub-region. I have come here today to further appreciate my country, Nigeria, because today at the ministerial level, I became very happy, or happier with my brothers in West Africa, when my colleague ministers appreciated greatly the contribution of my country towards our joint commission in WAEC for sustaining that commission. And I want to say to all of us from West Africa that Nigeria as a government will continue to do more and carry all of us together as your big brother. Having said all this, let me say that one of my take-homes today is that I can go home and say that almost all of us in Africa, and particularly this sub-region in West Africa, are taking the foundational learning as serious as we take it in Nigeria. Because most of the things we are doing in Nigeria in that regard are the things that we shared in our ministerial meetings. In Nigeria, we are encouraging children and all stakeholders, especially the parents, to make sure that all children within the ages of 0 and 16 are in the classrooms learning. And we're making it compulsory for every child to be in school through compulsory free education, including the feeding by government that is also free. We're implementing the global minimum benchmark of 20% for funding of education. We are already implementing the Tashkent Declaration of 2022. And back home, the federal government is encouraging the state government through advocacy to ensure that every child is made to be in the classroom. And in the course of our advocacy, we realize that almost all the states in Nigeria have laws with punishable clauses, making it mandatory and compulsory, in fact, a point of law that every parent must send his or her children to school. And I was coming here to beat my chest that in all our contributions, including training the teachers. We have the Train the Trainer program in Nigeria where teachers are giving so much attention of late. And we're also providing so much incentive to teachers, including better pay and other service provisions. We're even extending the services, the retirement age of teachers. We are making other policies available, including scholarships for students who want to study education in higher institutions. So I came here to beat my chest to say that Nigeria was the best, but I came to meet my friends, so I'm taking away from this conference that my brothers in Africa, particularly in West African sub-region, are doing their very best to follow the paths of Nigeria. And that is only a challenge for us back home that we want to also step up By and large, I want to appreciate the government of Sierra Leone, Mr. President, and his vice, and all the ministers for giving us a comfortable environment and meeting wonderful people from all over West Africa. So thank you so much, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Minister Goodluck Nana. We are running out of time. We are a little bit behind schedule. So we won't be having the second round. I will give the floor last to Minister Thinge from Sierra Leone for him to focus on the second leg of the question. Where are we going from here in line with the national commitments that have been made? All the engagement, from this summit, whatever we are planning to do at the sub-regional, within the ECOWAS region, the continental in line with CESA 2025, and also the global initiatives, on the 2030 agenda. Can you summarize and tell us what would be the concrete actions, actionable things that we will initiate, from this conference and with the support of all the partners, of all the coalition that is represented here for this important summit. So, Minister Thinge, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Honorable Vice President, thank you again for joining us. And on behalf of my colleagues, I would like to thank you and His Excellency for the level of detail and political leadership that you've provided for education in Sierra Leone and Saturday region and the continent. 3 takeaways before I present the communique that all the ministers have signed. Ben Piper said this morning that if there's any one thing we take away, it's that the governments in Africa have believed that they have the solution and they can solve the learning crisis. I think that was very evident, certainly from the takeaway from the ministers, but in the conversations and in the technical rooms that we have all been part of. The second takeaway was from Jaime Saavedra saying that we cannot come too late for those children who are in school now and the ones who are in pre-primary. And we have to double down, and I think there are many commitments about doubling down. And finally, GPE is here, and parts of the conversations that we've been having in GPE is around centering on country leadership. And we have demonstrated that the countries, it's not just Nigeria or it's not just Gambia, but that many countries are really working together, and we actually have a lot to learn from each other. And I know that at the local level for Sierra Leone, we are just about to develop our compact with GPE. We're eligible for, I think, up to 40 million, 22 million, and plus the multiplier. And I'll tell you and everybody in here that the things that we've learned will go into the development of our GPE compact, which will shape how we provide education and quality learning for foundational learning, pre-primary, all the way through. And the leadership of World Bank, the leadership who we engage with on the accelerator, we have the Zero Learning Poverty Program, the leadership of UNICEF, who we're engaging with on the compact development, and all of the leadership across the ministry and our local education groups, all the service level agreements that we have with our partners, those people are in here. So I'll tell you that for Sierra Leone, we're leaving this room, and these guys are going to go back to a conference room somewhere and downloading everything they've learned into the compact documents that we'll submit to GPE. So the timing works. Their work is easier now. Everybody, thank you for making their work very easy. So team, next week I want to draft. in terms of where we are going as a set of ministers, I'll read a communique that we have signed and are committed to, such that, and it's good that the ministers are up here as we read it. It's better for me to read it in paper, that way I'm not struggling on my phone. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. We, the ministers of education from Côte d'Ivoire, Gambia, Ghana, Liberia, Malawi, Rwanda, and Sierra Leone, at the inaugural Foundational Learning Exchange hosted in Freetown, Sierra Leone, on February 6-7, 2023, recognize the impact of the multiple crises of COVID-19, climate change, and the economy on quality education. We note that the burden of this challenge is even more significantly felt by children in the early years of education. We welcome the United Nations Secretary General's vision statement at the Transforming Education Summit, TESS. We agree with the notion that learning to learn is one of the key levers for transforming our education systems to reach Sustainable Development Goal 4, thereby transforming our societies to reach all the Sustainable Development Goals. We endorse the TESS commitments to action on foundational learning and support the recommendations in the 2022 UNESCO Born to Learn report. We are committed to take action to improve foundational learning outcomes for all children in our countries. All children should learn to read fluently with comprehension, acquire fundamental numeracy competencies, develop resilient socio-emotional skills, and harness digital education tools. At this first interministerial and intergovernmental summit, where we affirm our commitments to improving foundational learning outcomes, our goal is to equip current and future generations of learners with the tools and abilities they need to become nation builders by sharing and exchanging solutions and challenges from our own education systems. With our collective set of research-backed pedagogical and technological tools and evidence-based policy interventions, we reaffirm our commitments to ensuring children acquire fundamental literacy, numeracy, digital, and socio-emotional skills in line with our SDG 4 targets by 2030 in partnership with all stakeholders. Together, we commit to 1. Create and finance realistic plans aligned with our education sector plans and policies that monitor the progress of our learners and our education systems toward SDG 4 benchmarks and foundational learning indicators from TESS. 2, ensure equitable distribution of resources at all levels of our education system, including pre-primary and primary levels, that enable us to reach our foundational learning and other education goals. 3, support continuous teacher development in order to accelerate quality learning. 4, contribute to the global conversation on foundational learning by sharing data and research on what works in our countries and encouraging more collaboration from academic and other non-governmental institutions to identify evidence-backed tools to accelerate progress. 5, meet annually or biannually in countries leading the charge on improving foundational learning outcomes across our governments. We will share our individual and collective progress toward reaching the targets set in our plans and continue deepening our technical exchange. 6, collaborate on regional and interregional investments to accelerate foundational learning outcomes. 7, strengthen our data collection tools and systems to ensure we can track learning on a continuous basis and intervene where necessary to ensure evidence-backed policies and strategies. We remain committed and optimistic about system transformation in our classrooms, schools, communities, countries, and the world. The end. On behalf of my colleagues, the Minister for Ghana and Ivory Coast had to catch an earlier flight, and the colleagues who joined remotely, Rwanda and Malawi, this is what we all agreed to and what we worked on, and we'll leave here feeling very satisfied with the work that we're doing. And before I leave the stage, I also wanted to mention that the WAEC ministers met, that's Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Gambia, Liberia, and Ghana. And we also have a communique that will come out of that WAEC ministerial meeting. We don't remember the last time such meeting happened, but this engagement here has really propelled us to promote quality learning. We believe that you cannot transform education systems without transforming assessments. And we look forward to publishing that, and we'll share it with everybody. Thank you very much.
This is very enlightening, and we have learned that this is an ongoing process that will continue, and the communique is very much in line with the 5 thematic action tracks, objectives that drove the whole test process. Even if this summit about foundational skills acquisition, but it is very much in line with the test agenda. So we would like to thank you very much. Despite the challenges, there are still hopes. We have seen children, students performing very well, and this is very much in line with the Africa that we want. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. So. Dr. Senge is going to do a little presentation here.
The team from MBSSC made these lovely gifts for our visiting ministers. The other ministers who left already took theirs. So these ones are for you.
On behalf of my colleagues, all ministers, we recognize the specific intervention of David Senge, who is a younger colleague of ours, very innovative and thoughtful. This meeting that we have come to is not in vain, for so much have been done in person than would have been done if we have decided to do it remotely. I want to say thank you for the hospitality. We appreciate all that are going on here. And all of those who have come from distances to participate. I want to thank you so very much. God bless us.
Thank you very much, ministers. Well, the World Bank Sierra Leone Country Manager, Dr. Abdul Mwonge, and UNICEF representative, Dr. Suleiman Brahmo, will now follow on from their declaration and add their closing remarks. A round of applause for them.
Your Excellency, Mr. Vice President, Honorable Minister of Basic and Secondary Education, Honorable Minister of Technical and Higher Education, Honorable Ministers and government delegations from Malawi, Rwanda, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, the Gambia, Liberia, Nigeria, Edo State, and colleagues from the government of Sierra Leone, representatives of development partners, representatives of NGOs and civil society, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we would like to congratulate the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education on hosting and convening a very successful Transforming Education Summit on Foundational Learning. Congratulations, Dr. Senge. I would like to begin by mentioning that the Africa West and Central Education Strategy, which was launched last year, emphasizes three things: getting all girls and boys to school, early, making sure they learn in real sense, real learning, and number three, preparing them for the job market. Listening to the young folks who were here, I think Honorable Senge, the future is bright, and we can clap for Sierra Leone. We can also clap for ourselves for the rest of Africa. I think we are on the right track. The future is bright. There is more work to be done, but I think when you hear the testimonies given by the young boys and girls who came here a while back, really a lot is happening, and we should congratulate ourselves. I listened carefully to the presentations that were made by our colleagues from the different countries. There was emphasis on early childhood learning. And again, many African countries are making strides towards improving how early childhood education is taken seriously. Policies have been made, investments are ongoing, but again, a lot needs to be done. When I look at Kenya, for example, ECD is a devolved function. And some of the county governments in the rural areas are making huge strides in terms of investment, including the environment outside the classroom for children to learn. But I think gaps still exist in terms of how we coordinate and how we prepare the young children at that level to really learn the basics, which are critical: numeracy skills, transformable skills, and basic reading. This is important. Now, when you turn to the parents, I'm a parent myself, and my wife has been hammering me over the years whenever I miss an obligation to do with regards to the children. I think it's important we look at ourselves as parents also and ask yourself, when is the last time you took a book and read for your kid? When is the last time we are busy politicking, we are busy making money, we are busy running up and down, but bottom line, it starts in the household. If you cannot spare time to read the ABCD, the 1, 2, 3, okay, and you expect the school teacher to do that on your behalf as a parent, there is a gap. And I think that's where we have to go back as parents and say, okay, what are the basics we need to do for us? The school learning environment will be improved, but what responsibility you as a parent you are taking? The community. When many of us were growing up, you were the kid of the community. You could not mess around 100 meters away. No, because the message will cascade back to your mother, and before you realize Sunday morning, no breakfast. You get it? Where is the role of the community in harnessing the key to make sure we see the values and the norms of foundational learning are really brought on board? So I think for me, I appreciate, and I think the previous group presenters really made this emphasis, that parents, we have a role to play, the community, we have a role to play. I will not belabor the points in terms of what the others said. I congratulate the Honorable Ministers of Education for signing the communique. That's really a huge step towards taking the commitment on foundational learning very seriously. On behalf of my colleagues in the World Bank team and also other development partners in Sierra Leone, we work jointly. We will continue to support the government commitment towards deepening the reforms in the education sector. I will not again repeat these commitments, but we see it from the budget allocations. Despite the hard economic times, the government has been able to weather the storm and kept the commitment of 20% of the budget allocation. Now, what is important is going a step deeper and seeing that these resources trickle down towards foundational learning. On behalf of my colleagues at the World Bank Group, I would like once again to congratulate you, Honorable Senge, the team, and all participants for a very successful summit on foundational learning. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You just told me to make it very short. Excellency, Mr. Vice President, ministers here present, children, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me join all speakers, particularly my colleague from the World Bank, in congratulating the government of Sierra Leone, particularly the ministries of education, for hosting this event. And it's not going to make any good if I start to repeat the many things that have been said. But you all agree that when we talk about foundational education, we are talking about the very early years. And that could not be better music to the ears of the UNICEF representative here, who I happen to be. Now, the only additional thing or point I would like to make is, one, as we move forward with all the commitments that have been made here, it's important that we do not repeat some of the mistakes of the past. The first one is the issue of equity. In the past, when different areas of the educational sector, and indeed many parts of the economy were being developed, we started from the urban areas and we moved to the rural areas. Up till today, we have not been able to redress that imbalance. So, we know that in West Africa, and particularly in these countries that are involved here today, there is a situation where level of formal foundational education is relatively low, and we need to bring it up. But in doing so, we should not forget disadvantaged groups, disabled children, those in the rural areas, and not conclude that only people or children in the urban areas deserve this. The second point I would like to make is to re-emphasize the issue of technology. We do not have to repeat, as I said, mistakes of the past. We have loads of technological tools that are available. And the last COVID-19 experience taught us that we could cover or at least prevent and catch up in several ways by focusing on technology or using technology to the greatest extent possible. Finally, we have been talking about a lot about education. My colleague from the World Bank here talked about the family. Children, particularly those at the foundational education years, do not live in isolation, and our focus on the educational sector alone, or indeed even the foundational education sector, subsector alone, will not solve the problem. There are critical linkages with the economy, critical linkages with family life, critical linkages with every aspect of society for us to move forward and to make that communique doubly powerful. Perhaps one of the first steps we should be taking following here is to dissect and distill the nature of the linkage between foundational education and other aspects of culture, society, and the stages of development of the different societies, and make sure that we are able to harness those linkages and move forward. Finally, let me recommit UNICEF's support, total support in every way whatsoever, to making sure that these initiatives and the journey forward is realized. Indeed, that's why we're in the country, and that's why we're in different countries, in your different countries, honorable ministers, and we will continue to provide that support. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Up next will be the Honorable Vice President of the Republic of Sierra Leone to say a few words to officially close this grand learning exchange. So please, let's be on our feet as we welcome the Honorable Vice President of the Republic of Sierra Leone. A round of applause, please.
Thank you very much. Let's kindly sit down, please. Honorable ministers, development partners, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my task here today is to thank you and wish you well. First, let me thank all of you for what has been a very exciting 2 days event. I want to, on behalf of His Excellency, the President, the government, and the people of Sierra Leone, thank all those of you that have traveled from far away to participate in this very important event, more importantly, for your immense contribution. For us policymakers that have been here, although we are committed to pushing and ensuring that we attain the SDG to deliver education, we have also learned a lot in the last 2 days, believe you me. Looking at the topics and the issues that have been raised here, that range from learning outcomes, teaching, quality teaching, resources, motivational level, I am sure that these 2 days exchange no doubt provided an important opportunity to build a shared understanding of the challenges and opportunities to improve learning outcomes. Sitting down there since yesterday to today, you will agree with me, when we talk about learning crisis, it can be located, better located, in the crisis of education that has plagued the African continent over the last 30 years. You see, in the 80s and the 90s, when African governance systems started breaking down, the period that is largely referred to in African political history as the decline of the African state, the crisis of the African state. We witnessed the progressive decline of so many sub-Saharan African states, both in the area of governance and their inability to deliver public services, of which education is one of them. The period when we had the opportunity to go to universities, I had the opportunity to attend the Frabe College, and I started my master's program in the University of Ghana in Legon, and finished up in the University of Ibadan in Nigeria. In Ghana, I took 2 months in the university. The university was caught up in a lecturer's crisis that lasted for 7 months. So I had to transition to Nigeria to continue that master's program. But those were the times when African university systems were reduced. Essentially, we are no longer centers of learning and research. They were just centers of teaching. And that is the crisis that bankrolled most of the education sector in Africa. When we were going to school, primary school, there were no private schools then. We went to public schools. They were excellent schools, some of which were built far before independence. But over the years, like I said, the crisis of governance that plagued African countries, that affected the ability and capability of African states to deliver essential public goods such as education. The education sector was starved of resources. In those days, in the 80s and the early part of the 90s, you realize that in most sub-Saharan African countries, budgets that were allocated to the security and defense sector far above what was allocated to education sectors. And in the 90s, we started to talk about the reconstruction of the African state, gradually building back the state, putting back the state at the center of the development prospect of African countries, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa. And that reconstruction process was at several fronts. It was the governance part, where we realized that one of the fundamental challenges that were confronting sub-Saharan African countries was lack of good governance. So we started multi-party politics to improve public sector governance, elections, respect for human rights, expanding our investment in rule of law, building viable institutions capable of delivering services. And I still believe, although most African countries, particularly countries like Sierra Leone, who made progress in investing in education, there's still a lot to do. And that the reconstruction process is still ongoing. So what we are seeing today when we talk about poverty, learning poverty, is essentially those we are trying to make do with those days where the necessary investment in the sector was not done. So we are trying to catch up. Because when you move today in this country, you visit several districts and regions. As a politician, I travel every week up country. And every community you go to today, the first thing they ask you is about additional classroom. And we are very pleased with the investment we have made as a government. We've given 22% of the budget to education. And I want to reiterate the commitment of His Excellency the President that we are going to keep that momentum. But more importantly, as a government, we are very satisfied with the outcomes we are seeing. Today, we are very proud as a government that we can assess outcomes. We have the tools to measure them, and then they form part of the discourse for improvement. You see, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, although my role here is to come and thank you and say goodbye, I'm just drawing from this experience as a way to let you know that His Excellency the President is going to use his platform as a co-chair, whatever platform that is given to him, to continue to make commitment for African countries, particularly in the sub-region, to increase expenditure, and like our sisters and some ministers said yesterday, to see how we can place education at the continental agenda. Be rest assured. You see, we spoke about resources yesterday and today. And believe you me, there was one very important point that was made yesterday that captured. And that is one thing that we have also been grappling with, is that you can have 22%. You can give 22% to a ministry. But the most critical component is governance. Yesterday, our brother from the World Bank spoke about implementation capacity. Our sister from Nigeria that was chairing, moderating the event, spoke about the public sector, the ministry. It's very important that even if you give resources, I normally say it, if you don't build the kind of governance structure that is needed within that particular ministry to be able to use that resources and measure the impact of that resources, 22% will not make any sense. And that is what we have been grappling with also in Sierra Leone. When we came in, when we took over power in 2018, we divided the Ministry of Education into two because we realized that there were enormous challenges plaguing the education sector. So we wanted a focused attention on basic and secondary education, and also another focused attention on tertiary and higher education. Because when I was a researcher at the University of Bordeaux in 2003, I was contracted by Oxfam to work with the Campaign for Good Governance to do an assessment of the Education for All strategy in Sierra Leone. That time, as a young researcher, Professor Wuri was then the Minister of Education. And I traveled to 3 districts in this country, did extensive study. I visited schools in the region. I spoke to teachers, to head teachers, parents. That time you had the PTAs, very powerful, as the Parent Teachers Association. And then we wrote a report, very interesting report in 2004 on our assessment. And 3 things came out. One, that we found out that in 2004, in spite of the massive resources that have been pumped into getting the school system back on track as a result of a couple of years of conflict and displacement, public schools, you had what we call a de facto privatization of public schools, meaning that the fees they are charging poor parents in public schools were very high. That was a disincentive for parents to send their kids to school. The second thing we found out was that because of a couple of years of war and displacement, you had the schools were overwhelmed by unqualified teachers. But the third critical element of that study was that the school system, there's need to improve governance in the school system, from school level to the district level to the regional level, coming up to the ministry. And that study informed my knowledge, my understanding of the kind of task that the education system is facing, not only in Sierra Leone, but in sub-Saharan Africa. What we are saying here today is that most of what we are doing today is informed by that clear understanding of that deep-seated crisis in the educational sector. And I cannot agree more that foundation learning is critical. Putting the education sector back is critical. You see, we are spending 22% at a very difficult time. Like the president said yesterday in the closed-door meeting with partners, when COVID came and the Ukrainian crisis, it was very tough because you had reduced revenue. So we didn't have the luxury like we had in 2018 and 2019, where revenue was doing very well so that we can spend additional money into the education sector. But the president was committed that we have to keep that commitment. But at the same time, we realize that if you want to maintain that tempo, if you want to keep that commitment and that resource allocation, government has to look for money. That is one other area I want to talk about. That is the need for innovative financing. Because that 22% we have put is huge, and we believe that we are going to continue to spend more. It is going to increase. Because if you look at the need for additional classrooms today, if you look at the need to improve the welfare and quality of teaching, welfare of teachers and quality of teaching in the classroom, it requires additional investment. And we usually tell our partners, development partners, that we are also mindful of the need to generate resources so that we can invest in the productive sector, in the area of energy, improve the mining sector so that we can get additional resources. Because I always remember when you listen to center-right government in Western countries, they tell you, if you don't have money, how can you spend on social sector? So the productive sector opens an opportunity for us as a government. But even if we continue to invest in the productive sector so that at least we can get additional revenue, you cannot have a viable productive sector in a country where the knowledge and competence capacity is not high. So that takes you back to the need to spend in education. Because you have to build the competence. You have to build the knowledge base. Because the justification that is usually given by international institutions and big companies is that they come with external expertise. They say because we don't have those expertise. So a country like Sierra Leone that has got a wealth assets in mining, marine resources, we need to begin to build those competencies, because that is the only way we can have a sustained productive sector that is capable of generating the kind of revenue. So innovative financing. The other thing is getting regional organizations to be interested in education, like our sister said yesterday. Because when you look at the various commissions within ECOWAS and the AU, you realize that we can push those institutions more. Today, if you talk, our president is the chair of the African Peer Review Mechanism Commission, the head of state. Just today, they completed a discussion because they will be presenting a report. But most of the time, when you look at the APRM, it's a review about governance, governance, governance. I think the time has come for us to be able to divert some of the key issues, to be able to take some of these key issues about the education crisis, the table of the AU and the ECOWAS. And I want to reassure you that since you mentioned that yesterday, His Excellency the President was really pleased, and I'm sure the next AU conference, 16th and 17th of February, these are the kind of issues that the President will be discussing with his colleagues heads of state. And we hope that something concrete will come out of that, because we believe that the big or the greatest challenge facing, that we're going to face our effort to put the education sector back on track as it used to be in the 60s and 70s, will be resources. And this is the time we begin to think about innovative financing. Even within at country level, how can government ensure that 22% of the budget or the kind of amount of money you need to pump into the education sector is not reduced by any external shock, so that you have a way of securing that resources, so that you can secure those resources, so that you are able to demonstrate an uninterrupted allocation to the education sector. That is a commitment we want to make. But you see, usually as politicians, I normally tell ministers that the role of a president is to go and promise. We promise, and you, the ministers, you look for the answers to solve the problem. And the president is committed to this, and we will continue. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, usually this is a subject that I'm very passionate about. So I will, if you give me the forum, the platform, I will go on and on. But I will have to conclude at one point in time. That is, you see, what we are doing today, like I said, we are trying to reverse the poverty or the education crisis. And we have shown commitment. And I'm very pleased that our development partners are also here. I want to thank you for the support that we are doing this together. And you realize the last time I had the opportunity was invited by the World Bank to deliver the keynote address on the Fragility Conference. I made one statement. I said, the time has come. What COVID and the Ukrainian crisis has taught us is that the time has come for people to prioritize what they think that is so valued to them, that is so valuable to them. And the well-being of people and the education of our children, for us, is a priority. And that is, for us, is a value system, because we believe the only way we are going to reproduce a very effective, viable, and development-oriented sub-Saharan Africa is when kids in sub-Saharan Africa have the opportunity to go to good schools, get good education, and then be able to contribute. So for us, education is a value system. We value it. That is why we are prioritizing it. And we want our development partners to know that that is also something that we value. And we want institutions, big institutions with big resources, to be able to show some flexibility in the windows. You know, the World Bank is very known for windows. And some of these windows, usually, they are very tight. To be flexible enough for those windows, and then to create additional opportunity so that we can invest in areas that we value, and more importantly, in areas that we believe has a very strong organic relationship with the productive sector. Because usually when you want to spend on education and health and all this, they will say, no, spend on something that can bring some very good microeconomic returns. But those areas that can bring microeconomic returns need knowledge, need competence. And the competencies are in foundational learning. If you want to build the engineers of tomorrow, this is where they start. So education for us is something that we value. And we want to thank you. We want to thank all of you for supporting this event and for being here. And believe you me, like I said, me personally, I've learned a lot in these last 2 days. Sitting here yesterday, listening to ministers, listening to practitioners, and today, listening to the communique, it shows that we are on the right track. It shows that we are putting the energy. It shows that we are satisfied with the investment. It shows that positive outcomes coming out of the investment. So when you sit back as a government and you look like I said, at these kids today, and then you look at the momentum in this country. We are a couple of years ago, you go to some of these villages, most of these young boys and girls, you find them in the field, plowing. Today, every young boy and girl in this country wants to go to school. For us, that is satisfying and that is gratifying. And we are deeply satisfied with that. I want to, on behalf of the President, government, and the people of Sierra Leone, thank all of you from the bottom of my heart, because you have come and shared your perspective about something that we are so passionate about. So we want to thank you. And we are optimistic that we will continue to invest in education as a government and as a people. And we are also optimistic that this is something we can put on the regional agenda and will follow through. His Excellency is going to use his platform to continue to push this through. And I think there is no better time to come and organize a conference or an event of this nature in Sierra Leone than a time when you have a president that is committed to education, and at a time when you have positive momentum about education in Sierra Leone. We have been talking about this for the last couple of days, and I believe this conference is going to resonate in Sierra Leone for a long time to come. I want to wish our brothers and sisters who have come a long way, listening to the concluding remarks, they say, where do we go from here? First, I want to advise you to go back home safely. And I want to pray that you go back home safely. So that you go back home safely and be rest assured that our prayers will go with you. We wish you a safe journey back home. And that we hope to see you again in Sierra Leone next year. This is an year of election. We are confident that we are going to be re-elected back. So that we see you in a couple of years in Sierra Leone, so that we can do a proper stock taking of what we have outlined in the communique and what we have achieved. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of His Excellency, the President, the government, and the people of Sierra Leone, I want to formally close this foundational learning exchange event. Assalamu alaikum. God bless you.
A round of applause for the Honorable Vice President, Dr. Mohamed Julde Jallow. Thank you very much, Dr. Jallow. Thank you very much. If somebody misplaced his or her phone, please see the stage manager for your phone. So thank you very much, Honorable Vice President, once again, and to everyone today for all your energy and participation in exploring foundational learning in depth. We have collectively identified key opportunities and issues that are fundamental as we move forward in promoting foundational learning in each other countries. Could you please sit? Could you please sit? Could you please take your seats as the Vice President takes leave of us, please?